Nonverbal communication. Types of nonverbal communication. There are 4 factors that can influence how we interpret nonverbal cues, which include how well we know the person, the situation, the culture, and the nature of the nonverbal cues. Body movements. The most commonly known form of nonverbal communication is body movement. Our posture, gestures, face, and eyes can all convey meanings. For posture, most cues are subtle, like posture echoes, which involves mimicking another person's posture. Using posture echoes can help you come across as a more empathetic individual. Another aspect that posture reveals is a person's vulnerability. Gestures, also known as fidgeting, are scientifically defined as manipulators, in which one part of the body manipulates another part of the body. Holding, massaging, or pinching are all examples of manipulators, and an increase in manipulators indicates discomfort or relaxation. Face. It is not always easy to understand facial expressions because we make so many of them. Affect blends are the combination of 2 or more expressions that each display a different emotion. This can add to the challenge of reading facial expressions. In addition, different emotions are shown on different areas of the face. For example, happiness is shown in the eyes and lower face, whereas anger is shown in the lower face, eyebrows, and forehead. Although there are many different facial expressions, there are several universal ones that are recognized across all cultures. For example, happiness, sadness, anger, and fear. Eyes. The meaning of eye contact varies between cultures. For example, when meeting someone in a Euro-American culture, eye contact is seen as a sign of interest and involvement, but in cultures such as Latin American or Native American, eye contact is commonly a sign of aggression and disrespect. Voice. Paralanguage is nonverbal vocal messages such as rate, pitch, tone, emphasis, and disfluency. Disfluencies are the non-linguistic verbalizations, including the sounds and ah. Both paralanguage and disfluencies have the ability to reinforce or contradict the messages our words are trying to communicate. Sarcasm is an ideal example of this. We use emphasis and tone to change a statement's meaning to the opposite of what we are actually trying to say.
Clothing, physical attractiveness, and overall appearance can be just as revealing as the ways we sound and move. These aspects of ourselves create our overall appearance. This is typically the first thing that others recognize about us upon meeting. First impressions rely heavily on these 3 things. Do attractive people actually succeed more in life? Studies show that the more attractive you are, the better you have it in the workplace. A survey of over 200 managers admitted that subjectively attractive people get preferential treatment in both the hiring process and the job. And of course, physical attractiveness plays a part in a romantic relationship, especially online. People often automatically attribute kindness, confidence, and success with attractive people. However, studies also show that the more we get to know somebody, the higher the chances are of finding them attractive, even if they aren't typically considered it. Often the first thing that people notice about you is what you're wearing. Clothing is used to convey several different things about you without actually having to say them. Some of these things are your socioeconomic status, your educational level, and your interests and morals. Even colors affect the way others see us. In a study where a model was photoshopped wearing a different color, people rated her attractiveness differently. Red and black were rated the best colors. Physical touch is also very important in the study of nonverbal communication. Social scientists use the term haptics when referring to the major effects of touch in the study of human behavior. Touch usually benefits relationships, romantic relationships, and athletic teams alike. The touchier they are, the more successful they are together. Some experts say that humans are so receptive to touch because, as infants, it was the first nonverbal communication that we understood.
We use to create nonverbal messages through distance and territory. Distance is the space that we put between ourselves and others, and territory is the space that we consider to be our own. Distance, to better understand it, we will look at the proxemics, which is the study of how people and animals use space. Preferred space has to do with cultural norms, and in North America, an intimate distance can be used for close friends, and that's about 3 feet. Personal distance is usually with friends, and that's about 3 to 4 feet. Social distance is common in business and sales interactions, and that's between 4 and 12 feet. And a public distance can be 12 or more feet, typically between public speakers and their audience members. And to better understand how the relationship between distance and nonverbal communication may work, we found an article that explains that people may decrease their social distance in a moment of urgency, and that people with a generally more positive attitude stand closer together. Territory is a fixed space that an individual assumes some right to occupy, and that may be a room, house, neighborhood, state, and it's not always permanent. Often, people with higher statuses are granted more personal territory and greater privacy. So, for instance, bosses are normally given their own office, and sergeants normally have their own private rooms, while privates sleep in barracks that can be up to 40 people per room. An physical environment can reflect and shape interactions as well. Environments can shape the quantity and the quality of interactions that takes place in them. So, for instance, the attractiveness of a room may influence the happiness and energy of the people working in it. And it's even proven that workers generally feel better and do a better job when they're in an attractive environment.
Chronemics is the study of how people from different cultures use and structure time. In monochronic cultures like North America, Germany, and Switzerland, people tend to emphasize punctuality, strict schedules, and due dates. In contrast, polychronic societies like South America, the Mediterranean, and Arabian countries prefer flexible schedules where members are free to pursue multiple things at once. A primary influence on nonverbal communication is culture. Facial expressions tend to translate across many cultures. Even blind children naturally make faces which reflect happiness, sadness, or anger, while gestures do not always translate well. For example, the OK or perfect hand symbol used in the US and France is a vulgar insult in the Mediterranean. An example of how differences in nonverbal communication can impact intercultural relations is the distance at which people prefer to converse at. Americans are used to being around 4 feet apart, while Middle Eastern people tend to stand in much closer proximity. Similarly, the amount of eye contact expected differs between cultures. Consistent and direct eye contact is expected in Latin American, Arabian, and Southern European countries, more than in other cultures around the world. Gender stems from the ways in which we were raised, via the roles we see around us or the tasks and lessons we were given and taught. Women tend to be more expressive and better at recognizing others' nonverbal behavior, possibly as a result of tending to younger children who communicate nonverbally, or because they traditionally held roles lower in power than men, increasing the importance of being able to gauge the emotions of those in power. Social roles are now changing. Nanda Dimitrov explores how immigrant women from patriarchal cultures adapt to diverse gender roles in the United States, in Eastern European women, and the battle of the sexes in American culture. Most immigrant women studied came from societies which challenged tradition less than the US. As a result, many American feminists assume that immigrant women will embrace gender equality and prefer to be a woman in the American way, because they perceive traditional women as oppressed. However, many immigrants who were interviewed explained their traditional gender roles as primarily a form of politeness and secondarily a way of bringing new and interesting ideas to the table. One woman said, "I'm free as a bird. I want my rights, my civil rights. I, however, do not insist in bearing arms, on being asked to do things that I do not enjoy," giving the example of men offering to hold luggage or heavy bags for women because it's more practical as they tend to be larger and stronger.
When it comes to daily conversation, it can be really easy to overlook important nonverbal cues. Nonverbal cues are important because they are telling of the speaker's attitude and behavior, which can be beneficial for the listener. TheBalanceCareers.com wrote, up to 93% of communication effectiveness is determined by nonverbal cues. It's easiest to recognize nonverbal cues when you focus only on the gestures, motions, and expressions of the speaker instead of focusing on the content of the conversation. Doing this makes recognizing nonverbal cues in daily conversations much easier. Perception checking helps keep the listener in check when forming interpretations of another speaker, to avoid jumping to conclusions. Sometimes we read situations incorrectly and judge a listener's action as a rude or purposeful behavior. For example, if someone yawns while you're talking and you immediately assume they're bored from the conversation, they may just have as easily went to bed late and were tired. The book lists 3 steps to perception checking to read a situation. 1. Describe the person's behavior to them. 2. Reflect on 2 possible interpretations of the behavior you noted. 3. Ask for clarification about whether you interpreted their behavior correctly. It isn't always necessary to use perception checking in conversations. It might not be appropriate to ask someone about your observation of their behavior, or their behavior may have been easy to read and doesn't require clarification. This is simply a way to better communicate your interpretations of others. Monitoring your own behaviors helps improve your perception of others during conversations. Learning about your own gestures, facial expressions, and unique movements helps you control your behavior in conversations, as well as look out for similar actions in other people. Our book states that research suggests that most of us have blind spots when it comes to our own communication, and we may not realize these blind spots until we monitor our own behaviors. Increasing your overall self-perception helps better increase your awareness of others' actions in conversations, as well as your own.